And welcome to Whiskey Politics. I'm Dave Sussman, your host and purveyor at whiskeypolitics.net. Thank you for joining us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, and that way you'll be notified of upcoming interviews. Also, you can find us at America's Voice Television Network. And if you're listening by podcast, we're everywhere. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, as well as the Ricochet Audio Network. And oh, by the way, if you're listening on iTunes, if you can just give us a 5-star rating, if you're enjoying the show, that is, that way it helps others find us. Today's guest is somebody that, a lot of people would consider her extremely divisive, especially on the right. There's a lot of opinions on our guest today, Ann Coulter. Ann is a perennial author going back 20 years. I think she's in her 12th or her 13th book at this time. Her latest book, Resistance is Futile: How the Trump-Hating Left Lost Its Collective Mind. Love it. Love the title. Love the idea. We're going to talk with Ann about everything today. We're going to talk to her about immigration or illegal immigration. We're going to talk to her about social media, how both the left and the right view Ann, as well as what is going on today with Kavanaugh and SCOTUS. So sit back, pour yourself your favorite beverage, and enjoy the Whiskey Politics interview with Ann Coulter. And joining us is Ann Coulter, the author of the 12 best-selling books. Her latest is Resistance is Futile: How the Trump-Hating Left Lost Its Collective Mind. Welcome, Ann. How are you today?
Thank you. That last one makes it 13.
There you go. How's the book doing?
Well, it made the New York Times bestsellers list, so pretty well.
Fantastic. Well, I've read many of your books. In fact, a little anecdote for you. I think you get a kick out of this. About 13 years ago, I was leaving the Delta Lounge, and Maxine Waters bolted through the door. I held it open for her. I said, "You're welcome," and she just scowled at me. Well, 20 minutes later, I'm sitting in the airplane, and guess who happens to sit down next to me? Maxine Waters. And I look at her and I say hello very diplomatically, and she just scowled again and got her paperwork out. And so I proceeded for the next 5 hours, it was a transcontinental flight, to hold up your book, Treason, which has your face on the back cover staring at her for the next 5 hours.
Well, that totally served her right. I'm actually kind of glad to hear that. I met her at a reception back when I lived in D.C., and, it was a party. There were lots of congressmen. I don't even remember what it was for. But we came face to face. People are being jostling. So I stuck my hand out and said, "Hello, Representative." And she looked away and refused to shake my hand. I thought it was just me.
No, it's not just you. Yeah. No, it's the civility and the tolerance of the left. Ann, every time I've been hearing you lately, I'll be honest with you, I'm never sure what I'm going to hear and expect in regards to your opinion of Trump right now. Where do you stand right now on things?
Oh, I think it's very simple, all summarized in my last smash New York Times bestseller, In Trump We Trust. I'm a total MAGA girl. His campaign was magnificent. It was like a miracle campaign, the candidate I've been waiting for my entire life. So when the president diverges from the MAGA agenda, Make America Great Again, I get a little testy with him. I kind of thought that on November 8th, that wonderful night, 2016, I kind of thought after Adios America and In Trump We Trust, okay, this is 2 years of work, and, before that, opposing amnesty and writing a lot about immigration, so even more than 2 years of work if you think about it. But I thought, phew, my work is done. I can just sit back. I can write mysteries now. I can dedicate myself to cooking. No, it turns out this is going to be more of a transactional presidency. It's like training a puppy, so every once in a while he needs to be swatted with a newspaper. But I love him. I think I'd still write In Trump We Trust. I would do everything exactly the same. He was the only one even saying the things I wanted to hear. I mean, I get mad at him when he starts governing the way I expected Rubio or Cruz to govern.
And so you're surprised with the way he's been governing as opposed to what you would have expected from Cruz?
I would not have supported Cruz or Rubio. Well, Cruz because he was not a natural born citizen, but he is very smart and very articulate. I definitely want to point that out. Very unusual for a Republican, so I love that about Cruz. Don't want to Cruz bash here, but what I liked about Trump was that he was not the typical Republican. It wasn't tax cuts and endless war. It was America, we're going to have a little me time. I'm going to care about the manufacturing base. I'm going to care about the working class. This isn't going to be gifts to Wall Street and donors and Boeing and the military-industrial complex. We're going to end the job-killing trade deals. We're going to pull most of the troops home, I would say 90% of the troops, and most importantly, build the wall, deport illegals, actually enforce laws on the books about immigration. Maybe a little moratorium, as he suggested in his very first policy paper, so we can dust off the books and assimilate the ones already here. Those were the three pillars of the new Trump Republican. And he's sort of been subsumed by the Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan agenda. I love a lot of stuff he's done. I love Sessions as Attorney General. Immigration is way better than it would have been under any other Republican or Democrat, though not quite what we were expecting under President Trump. He killed the Trans-Pacific Partnership deal. It took him 420 days to get to NAFTA, and we haven't really done anything on that yet, but at least his heart seems to be in the right place. But we got the tax cuts, and I love tax cuts, but that should have been like agenda item number 20. That's just standard Republican crap. I love the regulation cutting, and I would say all of the regulation cutting, and if you talk to businessmen, they will agree with me. It's all the paperwork and the requirements and the threats of lawsuits. That is what has really unleashed business and I think done the most for the economy, much more than the tax cuts.
We have Ann Coulter. Resistance is Futile. Her newest book is out right now. And listen, I want to get into a little bit more of the policy. You certainly have your detractors. A lot of people don't know you have a significant legal background and experience. First, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, Ann, as a law clerk, and then you were at the highest levels in the judicial branch of the government working on the Senate Judiciary Committee on crime and legislation for immigration. How did you?
Yes.
How did your views evolve on illegal immigration?
Well, both legal and illegal. I think for a lot of conservatives, we were socked between the eyes with that famous cover story on National Review by Peter Brimelow. It seems so long ago. I told someone, I was just a kid then. I think I was in law school or just out of law school, but it was something I hadn't ever really thought about. It was expanded in Brimelow's book, Alien Nation. And then, other things happened, and Brimelow would email me now and then and say, why don't you ever write about immigration? And I kept telling him, well, you said it all in that long cover story in National Review. And then the reason I ended up writing about it in Adios America, and I think coming at it from many new angles, and did have something new to say, was I originally had pitched a different book to my publisher, which I still think is a great idea for a book, and I may write someday. I drafted a couple of chapters. I got to the immigration chapter. The immigration chapter was just going to be one illustration of my larger point, an excellent point that to this day has not been made. And I get to the immigration chapter, and okay, what would you want to know about, how our legal and illegal immigration is going? Well, the most basic fact I think you want to know isn't even, welfare consumption or how's the assimilation, how's the English language learning going. No, you want to know about crime. So I started looking for anything about, immigrant crime rates. How many immigrants are in prison, state, local? How many illegal? How many legal? From which countries? For what sorts of crimes? That information does not exist. Now I'm talking about a book 2 books back, Adios America. I described the process, which ended in frustration, rage, and tears after a few weeks. And I called my publisher and said, I have a new idea for a book. I've stumbled upon a massive government conspiracy to hide crucial information about probably the most important policy for any country. Who gets to live here and be a citizen in our democracy? And the way they go out of their way to hide information about the crime rates, types of crimes, that's very important. We're used to our own Native American criminals, and they have their own style. We're used to that. We're not really used to $20 million Medicare fraud. That's not a Native American crime,
Right.
or a lot of the credit card stuff. This is you will look at the names. That's our criminals, kill their wives for the insurance money and leave their DNA all over the place, so we can watch it on Forensic Files someday. That sort of crime we're used to. In any event, I said this is what I have to write about, and so Adios America is heavily about immigrant crime, the different kinds of crime they commit, and how the government hides the information. So that's how Adios America came about. Now, when I was working on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and I'm sorry, this is a very long answer. If I'm boring you, just cut me off. Weirdly, I was working for Senator Spence Abraham, who was a John McCain, Marco Rubio on immigration, which none of us knew when he was first elected, including apparently the voters of Michigan. He only lasted one term. So the rest of the Judiciary Committee staff, and it was a very small staff because he was a new senator, and there were a lot of new senators that year, we worked together on things like habeas corpus reform. When it came to immigration and their plans for immigration, I was kind of out. So what I worked on was criminal aliens, and got a lot of terrific provisions inserted in the law. My senator generously voted for the amendments in committee, but the people who came up and really thanked me sincerely were Senator Dianne Feinstein and Orrin Hatch. They were really important changes that were then denounced by the New York Times for the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, well, we know how the left has changed their opinion on illegal immigration. I mean, you had Bill Clinton standing up against it, you had Barack Obama standing up against it, and now today it's an open borders. Now, on immigration, you've suggested that Jeff Sessions is actually doing his job. Is that correct?
Yes. I think he's the only one. I mean, look, what Trump had and has is amazing political instincts. I really think everything would run much better if he fired everyone in the White House and just had, I don't know, maybe Melania or something. And just, when he wakes up in the middle of the night, the first thing he thinks of, just do it. Just do it, Mr. President. Your instincts are fantastic. But I think he's surrounded by swamp people telling him, no, you can't do that. So I like his instincts, but to contrast him with Jeff Sessions, he does need somebody like Jeff Sessions there. Jeff Sessions has been thinking, researching, legislating about immigration deeply for 20 years. He knows what he's doing. And if you look at the stuff he's doing on immigration as Attorney General, it's really fantastic. He's the only one keeping the immigration promises that Trump made during his campaign. So I'm getting a little testy with the president for tweeting against his Attorney General. Number one, because I want to keep Sessions, and number two, because once again, the president doesn't seem to realize he's president.
Well,
the boss does not send nasty tweets against his employees. He fires them if he doesn't want them.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate, and I think a lot of people that support Trump also feel uncomfortable with that to a certain degree as well. But what about the other side of Jeff Sessions? I mean, when we talk about his recusal of the Russian investigation and everything else, do you feel he's been strong enough in pushing the investigations or not?
Well, first of all, he had to recuse himself, and he didn't know he was going to have to recuse himself from what was going to become the focus of an independent counsel investigation, contrary to what Trump seems to believe. It's not like, Sessions was secretly thinking, I won't be able to help the president. I'm not going to tell him about this recusal that's coming. Nobody knew what crazy Hillary Clinton conspiracy theory the left would settle on to bedevil the president for the 8 years of his presidency. It could have been his business dealings before he became president, and then Sessions wouldn't have had to recuse himself. It could have been any tapes Michael Cohen has. I mean, all of that is turning out to produce more, at least, of Michael Cohen's crimes. I don't think there are any, there's no evidence of any Donald Trump crimes, but in any event, that's producing more. That could have been the fixation that they settled on. The Russian collusion story is insane. Who would have imagined? As I just described in the book, when it was first launched, the Russian collusion conspiracy theory, when it was first launched by Robbie Mook and you can search the Nexus files as I have
Right.
to see when it was first mentioned. It was on the eve of the Democratic National Convention because the WikiLeaks documents had just gone up. And so Hillary, as is her wont, needed some BS distraction. She always, whenever she's in trouble, she posits apocryphal enemies conspiring against her. So it was going to be the Russians working to help elect Trump. At the time, serious journalists in the New York Times, in the LA Times, in the Daily News, which hated Trump, put him on their cover every day of the campaign in a clown suit, they all laughed at this. They all said, this is, come on, even during the height of the Cold War, the Birchers never came up with, and my opponent is conspiring with an enemy power. They all sneered at it. The New York Times protected Hillary. Whenever she mentioned it at a debate, they'd like slip it in some little paragraph on page A14. So that's what the media thought of the Russian collusion story. It was only after the unthinkable happened and this horrible creature, Donald Trump, beat Hillary Clinton, that the media went back and said, well, maybe there is something to that Russian business. But it's really just meant to annoy and harass Trump. I think that's clear. Now, should the Department of Justice be prosecuting all of these Democratic criminals? Yeah, probably should. They probably should. But if given a choice, I mean, maybe Sessions or Trump should fire Rod Rosenstein and get the investigate Democrats for the first time in their lives part of the Department of Justice going. I would rather have, if I have a choice between those two, I'll definitely go with enforcing immigration law. That determines the future of our history, whether this country is going to survive. We got 60 seconds left on the clock. And if the left succeeds in overwhelming this country, changing its very nature with immigration, then there's no hope for any Republican president ever again. There's no hope for getting a Judge Kavanaugh again. It's going to be 9 Ruth Bader Ginsburgs and Kamala Harris's as president from now until as far as the eye can see. So immigration is existential for the country. If I'm given a choice, maybe you could. There are things the president could do: move Sessions over to the Department of Homeland Security and get a new attorney general who can pursue Eric Holder, Peter Strzok, the FBI, the DNC, Hillary Clinton campaign for conspiring with Russia, for all kinds of things. The Clinton Foundation, funny business. Or maybe replace Rod Rosenstein with somebody who would pursue that. But I would much rather have Sessions doing the immigration stuff than the investigation.
Ann Coulter with Resistance is Futile, her latest book, How the Trump-Hating Left Lost Its Collective Mind. And I want to talk a little bit about the book here, Ann. You know, with over 2 decades of you being a conservative bomb thrower, if you will, the left has seemed to place you into one of 2 categories, either ridicule or ignore. Do you find that some corners of conservatism that's happening as well for you?
Yes, you've noticed. I used to say, and here it is, this is a big admission, I was wrong about something. I used to say liberals couldn't learn. Mollusks can learn, small children can learn. Don't put your hand on that hot burner, but liberals could never learn. So, I don't know, roughly for my first 8 books, their idea was to anathematize me, to turn me into David Duke and warn the public, don't read this woman. But they bring me on to defend myself, and at least large segments of the public generally sided with me, and I'd have a smash bestseller. Around book 8, they realized that it was not only not hurting my feelings, but I rather enjoyed it. And suddenly that was it. We're going to pretend she doesn't exist. Which, the only satisfaction I get from that is I'm always imagining the young interns at MSNBC rushing into Rachel. And look what she says here. We've got to attack her. Settle down, Dennis. We're not going to mention her. So it must be driving them crazy. And I don't know, recently, yeah, you are right. I don't know what's going on. I mean, if I've done something wrong, I think somebody would tell me.
I think, Ann, there's certain individuals that are on the right that have been marginalized by many on the right. And it's almost an uber intelligentsia that is categorized people into this cabal of Trumpists. And if you support this president, then you're a Trumpkin. And I don't know. I feel like it's a divide that's really starting to tear apart conservatism. Do you agree?
I'm sure there's some of that. It's broader with me, and since I don't know what's going on, I'm not sure I can really analyze it. But yes, probably a lot of conservatives. I was certainly one of the first out of the gate to strongly and ferociously support Trump. And like I say, I would do it all over again, exactly the same way, and I would write "In Trump We Trust."
Okay.
And when I complain about him now, it is only because he is not hewing to those principles.
Right.
But a lot of the people shunning me now are totally in the tank. They're the 3D chess people. So they're more in. It's just so. Before I was out because I was for Trump. Now I'm out because I'm not for Trump enough. Because I won't defend every stupid thing he does.
Yeah, but I mean, you were one of the earliest. Listen, one of the greatest montages, and I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times, but the Election Day montage that starts with you on Bill Maher's show 3 days after, I think, Trump made that Mexican rapist speech. He predicted Trump winning the GOP nomination, and the howls and the laughter and the face from Joy Reid's bemusement. You called it. The smartest people in the room gave Hillary 85% chance of winning the presidency. Now, today the polls don't look so good for the GOP maintaining the House in 2018. Are they right?
Well, I think in general we have to take the position that polls are meaningless in the era of Trump. But having said that, the assumption should be there will be a blue wave. Whether it's enough to take the House, I don't think it's going to be enough to take the Senate. We haven't happened to have a good year in the Senate. Whether it's enough to take the House, I don't know. But I base that not on the polls, but just on historical precedent. Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, the way that you're looking at things right now, there seems to be this, as we talk about a blue wave, but the concern that I have as a right of center person is that this blue wave just isn't a typical Democratic blue wave. This is now an extreme leftist wave where you have this upsurge with the Bernie guys and this socialism.
And also kind of a race thing. I mean, there's
very
racist. An open attempt to throw the white guys out of the Democratic Party, which is why all of the Democrats you think of, almost all of them, talking about running for president. I mean, other than Cory Booker and Kamala Harris, but they're all. It's like Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, Di-Fi. They're all 100 years old. This is like the end of the white Democrats. Kerry.
Yeah, and they're being replaced by people that don't really have any understanding of economic systems. This is pretty scary stuff. Now, your book, Resistance is Futile, you talk about this resistance, and I think you're seeing a microcosm of this right now in the Kavanaugh hearings as they're happening right now.
Oh, yes.
Right? Which seem to be, these protests have been orchestrated by the Senate Democrats. Is that not, I mean...
Yes, they didn't even particularly deny it when Senator Cornyn said if this were a court hearing, you Democrats would be held in contempt right now. You're encouraging this. You gave them their passes.
Yeah. So they invited these people, is what you're saying. Do you think American politics... I mean, we're going through a period right now I've never seen. And I remember Code Pink with George W. Bush. It was pretty bad, but I've never seen this before. I don't think any of us have. Do you think we can ever be civil again? Or is it only... unless the Democrats are going to be taking power again, this country is never going to come together.
Well, part of it, I have to say, and I don't mean to sound monomaniacal, but a lot of it really does come back to immigration. I mean, this is normal politics south of our border. This is how politics is practiced. This is why we believe in assimilation. You got to get used to the whole democracy thing where you come together peacefully and petition the legislators. It's not, I'm angry, therefore I run out and start, protesting and burning stuff and breaking stuff. But that's very common in other countries, and I think we're kind of getting some Latin American politics here. To combine that with the general craziness and mob-like behavior of the left, covered in another one of my books, Demonic, about how the left has always relied on a mob and used a mob. You already have that tendency in the left, and to be throwing in people who aren't assimilated to American democracy and free speech, for example. I mean, in polls of of immigrants, they do not believe in free speech. People think it's just young kids. I don't know if you saw those polls about 6 months ago about how millennials don't believe in free speech.
Yeah.
They've done all these polls on college campuses. Well, which one is the worst? Why did it start at Berkeley? Berkeley, I forget what it is, but it's only like 20% white. So when you're bringing in people who don't have a tradition of free speech, and I mean, free speech, in a way, it's not a natural thing. I suppose if you ask a 3-year-old, should Tommy be able to say you're a poopy head? No, he should not. But it has to kind of be banged into you when you're brought up learning that we believe that it's in the competition of ideas. You don't respond to, for example, Alex Jones with his conspiracy theories. There are a lot of conspiracy theories in America. Spike Jonze and Michael Moore have movies that win awards with equally insane conspiracy theories. How do you respond to conspiracy theories if you have been brought up in a country like ours with a First Amendment? In fact, only a country like ours with such a strong commitment to free speech. You can test conspiracy theories with other speech.
Well, a lot of that comes down to who the arbiters are of what can be considered hate speech. And we've got this social media situation this week where you've got Jack Dorsey, you've got from Twitter, by the way, Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg. They're testifying at the congressional hearings on social media and free speech. You were personally reprimanded, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it was by Twitter, by you posting
Facebook.
a Breitbart.
No, Twitter's been better.
I'm sorry?
Twitter's been better. It was I hate going on Facebook because it's so user unfriendly. So I still have a Facebook account, but it looks like I was using Facebook all the time because my tweets used to post there automatically.
Gotcha.
When it was a tweet I sent that posted automatically to Facebook, Twitter didn't mind it, but Facebook came in after I was reported 6 months later for retweeting someone who had with a news story attached, by the way, of illegal immigrants surrounding Senator Tom Tillis, who, by the way, is, Mr. like open borders, so they're really morons. But they're screaming at him F and not using the full F. They were using the full F word. F this man. F this Republican. They're surrounding him, screaming that. So that's what the news story is. Somebody retweets that saying, President Trump, get rid of these parasites. They're illegal aliens. They hate you. They hate your supporters. What's stopping you from deporting illegals? Something like that. That was reported because illegal aliens, people who are lawbreakers, were referred to as parasites.
Oh, boy. Yeah. And so where does this go? Where do we end up here? Because obviously we have this slippery slope situation, Alex Jones, I'm not a fan of, by the way. But, if you start picking and choosing who can and can't speak, where does this end up?
No, I know. I'm not a fan of David Leonhardt at the New York Times, who writes slanderous things and untrue things about the president. How about we ban the New York Times? There are a lot of people I'm not fans of, but I prefer... and I do have a little chapter on David Leonhardt in my book, Resistance is Futile, on his 3,000 reasons or 3,000 times Trump was racist. I love when liberals give these surprisingly large but meaningless numbers. They do with the global warming and 4,000 scientists agree. And then you look at the list and most of these so-called scientists are really lawyers, not quite scientists, and the 17 intelligence agencies. Americans don't care if it's a single intelligence agency. Just show us the evidence that it was Russia that hacked the DNC, which, if they did, so what?
Yeah.
Lots of governments, Mexico, Israel, China. Oh, remember you'll remember when you read my book, the Chinese nationals were literally bringing duffel bags of cash to the DNC under Bill Clinton.
I remember that.
Special counsel.
Yeah.
No one at the New York Times upset about it. Lots of countries interfere in our elections. Moreover, we interfere in their elections all day long. So, so what? And so what for like 8 billion different reasons. Is what Russia allegedly did to the Democrats is what the media does to Republicans all the time. Release true information. What was the Access Hollywood tape? That was illegal. Trump didn't want that out there. He ought to sue on that, by the way. He could collect treble damages for that. You are not allowed to secretly record someone, and that was not part of the show. That was secretly recording him, husband it for 15 years, and then produce it a few weeks before a president, or produce it anytime. That's illegal. He should sue. So the media does this to Republicans all the time. So I say, so what, to the WikiLeaks putting the DNC emails up. But we still don't have, just, point of fact, we still don't have any evidence that it was the Russians. All we have is them haranguing us saying, 17 intelligence agencies, do you believe 17 whenever they are giving you surprisingly large and yet meaningless numbers, they're lying.
So many more questions for you, but folks, find Ann Coulter's Resistance is Futile, How the Trump-Hating Left has Lost Its Collective Mind. Are you going to be at Politicon next month?
I was just going to ask you that. Yes, I am. Are you?
Fantastic. We will be there. Maybe we could do a quick sit down together. I'd love to see you again and watch you on the panels. I got to tell you, anybody that hasn't been to Politicon before, it's both left and right representatives from each of their corners sitting on stage together, having a kumbaya, and Ann is nothing but diplomatic and polite.
Yeah, it's fun. It's not a bunch of, maybe there are a few crazies, but not a lot of crazies. Yeah,
no, it was
really
a lot of fun. I remember, I think last year, was it, or was it 2 years ago, you were on stage with Van Jones. That was a great one.
That was a good one.
Yeah, that was a blast.
Yeah, I don't know who they have me with this time, though. I assume it'll be a debate.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing you, Ann. And folks can find you where? On Twitter and Facebook?
Twitter, technically Facebook. I guess I have to start posting separately there now. And AnnCoulter.com.
AnnCoulter.com. Ann Coulter, thank you so much for taking the time. Greatly appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you next month at Politicon. Thank you so much.
Good to talk to you. Bye-bye.
Likewise. Take care. Bye-bye. And folks, you can continue to find us and our video series at YouTube. Just make sure you subscribe and get that notification button clicked, and that way you'll be updated on all upcoming interviews. And you can also find us at America's Voice Television Network. And if you're listening by your podcast application of choice, please give us a 5-star rating on that application if you are enjoying the show, especially iTunes. It helps others find us. Again, very special thanks to Ann Coulter. I'm Dave Sussman. You can find me at David Sussman on Twitter, and we'll be back again very soon at Whiskey Politics.